There are a lot of strange tales that were told in the South, and this particular one has to do with something that many of you have heard of. I'm sure most of you have not seen, but there's talk of this happening very close to where we live. The story is called Boo Mama. The year 1968 was full of conflict and contradiction, a tumultuous time of highs and lows. Although blacks and whites were dying together in Vietnam, a distant country in Southeast Asia, at home the races were divided over basic human rights. Nobel Peace Prize winner Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in Memphis. His death was followed by days of rioting. 2 months later, Robert F. Kennedy, brother of assassinated President John F. Kennedy, was himself assassinated after winning the California Democratic primary. When the day to day grind got to be a bit too much for some, a few people chose to drop out. At the time, there was a saying, "Stop the world, I want to get off." But since the world could not be stopped, many people just walked away. From the age of 16, Letty had been an activist committed to nonviolent action against racism and discrimination. While in college, she'd participated in sit ins, freedom rides, voter registration campaigns, and peace protests. Later, working in Memphis, Letty had met and married Lieutenant Joe Morrison, U.S. Marine Corps. 2 months before their son Neely was born, Joe had been shipped out to Vietnam. He was killed 6 months later. With her husband's funeral still fresh in her memory, Letty heard the news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed in Memphis at the Lorraine Motel. Although violence was contrary to everything Dr. King had stood for, Letty longed for a physical outlet for her rage. "What is this world coming to?" she whispered. On the morning of June 7th, 1968, Letty addressed a small group who gathered outside the storefront office of the Center for Progress Through Peace, where she worked. "Yes, it's true, it's true. Robert Kennedy is dead. Martin was for peace and he was killed. Malcolm X said fight back and he was killed. Robert Kennedy said stop this senseless war and now he's dead." Letty was screaming at this point. "Anybody who stands up for rights gets shot in this country. Robert Kennedy is dead. Love, peace, equality, justice, and freedom have died too." Someone snatched the mic and pulled her inside the building. "Hey, cool it." It was Germain, director of the CPTP and a veteran civil rights activist. "Don't start a riot," he said firmly, though his eyes were gentle and kind. Since Joe's death, Germain and his wife Sylvia had been like parents to Letty, taking mother and son in and giving Letty a job. Letty wouldn't deliberately hurt Germain or the center, but she felt herself spinning out of control. She trembled with emotion. "That's it. I'm sick and tired of cooling it. I'm burning up with cool." Letty paced back and forth as she talked. "I was cool when a woman put a loaded shotgun to my head just because I was sitting at an all white lunch counter. I stayed cool when firemen turned hoses on me for peacefully protesting the murder of innocent children in a church bombing. I was cool when they murdered Martin Luther King. And I was super cool when they told me that little Neely would never see his father because Joe had been killed in a place most of us can't even pronounce. Don't talk to me about being cool, Jermaine. What has being cool done for me? Nothing." "Okay, okay," Jermaine said gently. "Just calm down now." Letty covered her face with her hands and wept. "I'm so tired." Jermaine handed her a tissue and she wiped her eyes. "For all our efforts, what has changed, Jermaine? Are people living in better housing? Are people getting good health care? Is it really better now than it was 10 or 20 years ago?" I wanted so much more for my son. Germaine sighed. So did I. We all did. Germaine and Sylvia and all her friends at the center tried to talk Letty into staying, but she'd made up her mind. She was going to get out of Memphis. I realize now, she said, stepping on board the bus, that there's no way for me to change the world. But I do have something to say about the piece of earth where I live. We're going to where I hope it will be better. When you get settled, write us, Germaine said with fatherly concern. Take care. Orchard City, situated in the mountains of eastern Tennessee, seemed like an ideal spot to make a fresh start. Using some of her military survivor's benefits, Letty bought the old Lippincott place up on Orchard Mountain. What the new home lacked in modern conveniences, comfort, and style, it made up for in beauty and peace. The rural community received the outsider coolly at first, thinking she might be the advance guard of a hippie invasion. Letty didn't care. Neely seemed to thrive in the new environment, and Letty took joy in watching him romp and play freely in the solitude of their mountain home. But that peace was shattered when Neely disappeared into the woods out behind the house one spring morning. Letty charged into Sheriff Pete Martin's office on the verge of collapse. My baby, she cried, gasping for breath. I was hanging out, Wash. Neely was beside me, but when I turned around, he was gone. He must have wandered into the woods. I looked and looked. Please come, I need help. Don't get yourself all in a stew, the sheriff said calmly. Neely ain't the first young'un who's got himself lost in the woods. Usually we find him perched on a ledge, too scared to move. His words were meant to be kind, but Letty was unconvinced. Sheriff Martin put together a search party, and they combed Orchard Mountain from bottom to top and back down again. Nothing. Not a clue. When they hadn't found Neely by nightfall, an uneasiness settled over the searchers. A 2-year-old ain't got much chance up here alone, Letty overheard one of the men say. She knew it was true. Orchard Mountain challenged the best hikers and hunters, and some of them had to be brought out by helicopter. Finally, Jay Wilson's hounds tracked the boy's trail to a ledge where they found his brown teddy bear. It's Neely's favorite toy, Letty told the sheriff. Her lips quivered, but she refused to cry. He called it Boo. Sheriff Martin couldn't hide the concern on his face. Letty saw it and responded. If he fell from that ledge, she argued, then where's his body? Wild animals? The story preempted the Vietnam War news for 3 days running. A Boy Scout troop came from Knoxville to join the search, and a motorcycle club also helped. Germaine and Sylvia even came to aid their friend, but by the end of the week, the media had withdrawn, and the volunteers had, one by one, given up hope and gone home. I'd keep a looking, Sheriff Martin told Letty, but without leads, I don't know where to start. Germaine and Sylvia were the last to leave. When Letty was alone, she let herself cry. I'll never stop looking for you, baby, she sobbed. And then she dried her eyes and pulled herself tall. I know you're not dead. A mother knows such things. Letty refused to leave her mountain home more than an hour at a time, hoping that Neely might come back. Day after day, she went to the woods and called the boy's name over and over. Ain't a bit natural, the women said when they heard her pitiful cries. Letty needs to forget about that boy. He's dead for sure. And holding on to hope where there ain't no hope, it just ain't natural. Letty knew what they were saying, but she stubbornly refused to despair. My baby will be back, she said. I know it. Letty's faith paid off. 1 year, 2 months, 3 days, and 4 hours after his disappearance, Neely was found on the steps of the Mount Olive African Methodist Episcopal Church, naked as a jay and smelling like he'd tangled with a family of skunks. Except for a few scratches and a lot of chigger bites, he seemed none the worse. Reverend Clyde Anderson sent somebody to get Letty. Meanwhile, he declared Neely's return a miracle, and Mother Jacob sang Amazing Grace. There hadn't been that kind of spirit in the AME church since old Abe, the town drunk, put down the bottle and joined the church. The whole congregation was moved to tears when Letty laid eyes on her son for the first time in more than a year. The boy's return raised a lot of questions, and Sheriff Martin decided to reopen the case to get answers. Where had Neely been? Who with? Why was he taken? Why did they bring him back? Or did he find his way back alone? The investigation began with Neely being given a complete physical and psychological examination at the University Hospital in Knoxville. When asked about his experiences, the boy offered no help. He made lots of sounds, but the team of pediatricians who examined him thought it was just baby talk. Sheriff Martin joined Letty in the conference room. Except for your son's delayed communication skills, Dr. Jameson, the chief doctor explained to Letty, little Neely is in remarkable shape. But he shouldn't be. Your son's body shows signs of extreme trauma. Pointing to the x-rays, the doctor said, there have been severe injuries to his spine, lungs, liver, and spleen. Such injuries should have killed him. But through some miraculous healing process, this child got well. I've never seen anything like it. And another doctor immediately began his report. I've examined Neely's lab work, and frankly, I don't know what's going on. His blood cells look healthy, but they're slightly altered. A mutation of some kind that we've never seen before. We'd have to do many more tests to determine that. Next, the child psychologist introduced herself and gave her report. Mrs. Morrison, contrary to what we suspected when we saw the x-rays, Neely has no brain damage either. He's alert, responsive, and interacts well with others. Your child is a healthy, active 3-year-old and very, very bright. However, his verbal skills confuse me. I don't agree with my colleagues that it's just gibberish. I'd like to do more tests too. Letty looked at Neely playing on the floor. He seemed curious about everything, pointing first at one thing and then another and jibber-jabbing nonstop. I must admit your reports are disturbing, but tell me this. Is my son okay? We don't have a lot of answers, Dr. Jameson said, but one thing is for sure. Somebody has taken very good care of this child. He's in excellent physical condition. Who? Sheriff Martin interrupted. That's what I want to know. Who took this child and why? I don't believe in the little green men in the spaceship, he said. Letty raised her hand for them to stop. I don't care about who, why, or where. Neely is back with me, and that's all that matters. The doctors pleaded with Letty to let them study the boy longer, but Letty wouldn't allow it. Don't you think my child has been through enough? Maybe later I'll let you do more tests, but not now. And she retreated to the mountain and began piecing their lives back together. It didn't take long for Letty to start noticing things about Neely, curious things that troubled her. He refused meat and sweets, choosing a fresh apple over a piece of Letty's homemade apple pie every time. But stranger still was the rate of Neely's hair growth. Even accounting for longer styles, his hair needed to be trimmed almost every day. Letty noticed something else. Neely no longer sucked his thumb, and he was potty trained. Who helped you break these habits but didn't teach you to talk? She wondered. The boy was full of sounds, but they made no sense, and he tried to understand or make himself understood. Neely got confused and cried. Sometimes the child wept softly for no reason. The doctors had told Letty that Neely had a delayed language skill. They suggested she talk to him a lot and read to him regularly, but reading was the most frustrating part of the day for both mother and child. Though Neely seemed eager, he lost interest as soon as Letty began. Oh, Neely, she said on the verge of tears, I'm trying so hard. Please be patient with me. Toy Ben too, Neely said, snuggling against her. Toy Ben too, he repeated. Letty didn't know what the boy meant, but she smiled and kissed him. I love you, little boy, and don't you ever forget it. Then one day, Letty stumbled onto something. Let's have a glass of orange juice, she said, showing Neely the carton. Neely shook his head. Sawa, he said, pointing to a pitcher of water. Sawa. After nervously pouring a glass of water, Letty handed it to her son. Sawa, she repeated the word that he'd used. Neely took it, smiling proudly because he'd finally made himself understood. After gulping down the water, he bounded off, chattering and squealing playfully. Letty followed behind him, desperate to know more. Read, she said, holding up a book. Frouse, he said, taking it and climbing into his mother's lap. Opening the book, Letty pointed to the colorful pictures. Bird, she said. Neely covered his mother's mouth with his hand and shook his head. Naga, he said, Naga. The next page. Tree. Pota. Letty turned the page to a large brown bear. Neely touched the picture with remembering fingers. Boo Mama! He clapped and giggled. Then, trying to lift the image off the page, he shouted, Boo Mama! And he kissed the picture. Toy Ben too, Boo Mama! Letty's heart leapt with joy. You remember, she said, putting Neely down and rushing to the hall closet. She rummaged through a box and found the tattered brown bear that Neely had affectionately called Boo. She offered it to Neely, but he pushed it away. No, Boo Mama, he said, pointing out the window and growing more fretful. This is Boo. Don't you recognize your friend Boo? No matter how hard Letty tried, Neely would not be comforted. Looking out the window, he called again and again, Boo Mama! Boo Mama! Boo Mama! That night, Neely cried himself to sleep, and so did Letty. At first light, Letty and Neely caught the bus to Knoxville. The first place she stopped was the language lab at the university. She gave them Neely's words and asked that they translate them and identify what language they were from. They told her it would take a few days to research, but if she'd leave a self-addressed stamped envelope, they promised to forward their findings. Then she went to the library and found several books about child development. Neely paged through a picture book while Letty read. Children often make up their own words for things. They create imaginary playmates and creatures with whom they can share a secret world. On the way to the bus station, she and Neely stopped to get ice cream. He seemed to enjoy the treat and laughed when it touched his nose. Thank you, Mama, he said haltingly. Thank you. Oh, Neely, Letty shouted for joy. You said words, and you called me Mama. Toy Ben too, Mama, he said. Letty was more convinced than ever that Neely's strange talk was only a developmental phase. He was going to be fine. Just fine. It had been a wonderful day until Letty undressed Neely for bed. A strip of hair had grown down the middle of his back. Letty touched it with shaking hands. Overcome by guilt, Letty reprimanded herself. Maybe you should have let the doctors do more tests. But as she held Neely close in her arms, she felt comforted. Finally, Neely went to sleep, exhausted. Letty fell across her bed and fell asleep too. She was awakened by a mournful wail that rose from the woods, filling the night with horror. Then came a metallic odor, a foul mixture of sulfur and coal that she recognized as the smell that had been on Neely when he came back. Letty rushed to the boy's room, but he wasn't in his bed, under it, or in the closet. She heard footsteps outside the house and looked up in time to see a large shadow move across the window. Was it a bear? Any minute she expected a wild animal to crash through the door. Letty dropped to her hands and knees so as not to be seen and then crawled down the hallway. Neely, she whispered, where are you? Mama, he said, running to her from the bathroom. Mama, he said, taking her hand and leading her to the kitchen. He wanted her to open the back door. No, Letty said, pulling him away. Come here. There was something at the back door. She could hear it breathing. Letty held on to the boy tightly, but he struggled to free himself. Boo, Mama! Confused and terrified, Letty yelled to the intruder, Leave us alone! Please, go away! It was hard to tell how long she sat on the floor holding Neely, too afraid to move. At last, when she thought it was safe, Letty stood up and peered out the window, searching the moonlight backyard for the signs of life. Mama, Neely said, reaching up. Letty lifted him to the kitchen counter. He looked out the window and waved. Boo, Mama, he said, pointing to the woods. A moonbeam fell across the boy's face, and Letty saw, to her horror, that his eyes were flame red. Morning arrived on a spectacular note. Spring was inching its way up Orchard Mountain, but Letty paid no mind to the flowering dogwoods that laced the woods. She ventured into the trees for another reason. With a shotgun hoisted over her shoulder and Neely in tow, she waited, not knowing what to expect. Right away, she felt watched. Suddenly, the normal hum of the woods had stopped. The absolute silence was unsettling. Now is the hour. Stay cool, she said, steeling her nerves and proceeding with the plan. Circling the area, Letty returned to the clearing out behind the house. Stay here in the backyard, Neely, she ordered. I'm going in the house to get us some water. No sooner was she inside the door than that powerful odor came. Neely recognized it and started toward the woods. Boo, Mama, he called, his arms outstretched. By using an old hunter's trick, Letty had doubled back through the house and re-entered the woods from the downwind. She hid in a clump of bushes that gave her a clear view of Neely. He stood in a clearing calling, Boo, Mama! With the shotgun leveled and steady, she saw something incredible. A hairy creature, big like a bear but with human features, emerged from a clump of bushes opposite Letty. Without a single measure of fear or repulsion, Nettie rushed towards the creature, jabbering in his unknown tongue. Gently, the creature bent to scoop the child into its enormous arms, enveloping him with a big hug. Boo, Mama, he squealed. Letty watched the bizarre reunion with a mixture of fear and surprise. She was bewildered by the obvious trust and affection Neely had for the creature. None of it made sense. Stepping from the safety of her hiding place, she aimed the shotgun at the creature's head. Put my baby down, or I'll blow you to kingdom come. The creature pivoted and lowered Neely to the ground, and the boy clung to its leg. Come to me, Neely, Letty ordered in her no-nonsense voice. Neely was confused and looked to the creature for permission. It nodded. Mama, the boy walked toward Letty, looking back to make sure his friend was still there. Who? What are you? Letty asked. What have you done to my child? The creature remained motionless, gazing at the gun with wondering red eyes. Letty studied the creature cautiously. You're not a bear or an ape, she reasoned. No response. Look, Letty said, if you can understand me, please say something. Do something to show me you don't want to hurt Neely and me. Still no response. Look at my son's eyes, she screamed. Look at his back. He's changing into what? Hot tears stung Letty's face. She pushed Neely behind her. Please, tell me what's going on. What have you done to him? Try to understand. Neely is all I have in the world. The creature sighed. I know. The voice was thick and raspy, but clearly female. Speaking slowly, she said, I brought him back to you. Neely slipped from around his mother and rushed toward the creature. Boo Mama! So you're the one he calls Boo Mama. It makes sense, Letty whispered, remembering Neely's teddy bear. There was a gentleness about the creature that eased Letty's fear. Feeling less threatened, she lowered the gun. The creature explained, You call us Sasquatch, Bigfoot. We are the Gen. We are human, but different. Sun is not good for us, and we live deep inside the mountain. There are others like us everywhere. Why did you take Neely? I found him hurt. He fell from a ledge. Letty gasped. He was mostly dead, the creature continued. He needed blood, or he would die. So we transfused him with our blood. We didn't know what would happen, but Neely lived. Letty looked at Neely's red eyes and fought back tears. His hair had grown overnight to shoulder length. Patches of hair were growing on his back and in the back of his hands. Is he changing into one of you? Yes, we should have kept the boy, but you cried and cried, and I heard and brought him back. How long will it take before he looks like you? We don't know. Letty felt helpless. She kicked at the dirt with the toe of her shoe, then slumped on a nearby rock ledge. She wanted to hate the creature, but in spite of herself, she couldn't. After all, it had saved Neely's life. What is your name? I know you only as Boo Mama, Letty said. I am Nos, the creature said, sitting beside Letty. Neely played contentedly between the two of them, and as much as her limited English would allow, Nos talked about her civilization. Her people had conquered disease, overcome hatred and greed, and harnessed resources within the earth to prolong life. Nos was 170 years old, and yet considered middle-aged. Letty sighed. A lot of people have been locked up, beaten, and even killed for daring to dream of such a world. Darkness always came to the woods faster. Nos sniffed the air and then ended the conversation by standing. Letty grew uncomfortable and she hopped to her feet too. I'd better be going now, she said, taking Neely's hand. Nos blocked her way. The boy must come with me. He can no longer live in your world. He will die. Letty felt her knees buckle. No, she said, grasping at straws. There must be some other way. No, Nos said, calling Neely in her language. No, Letty said, raising the shotgun. Come to me, baby. The child looked from one to the other. Mama? Boo Mama? Nos spoke to the boy in her language, and the boy answered, Toy ben tu, Boo Mama. Toy ben tu, Mama. Nos turned to Letty, and in a single movement, she took the shotgun and twisted it into a heap of metal. He says he loves us both. What if you and Neely both come with me? You want me to come too? It's your choice. Letty looked at Neely. His red eyes sparkled beneath bushy brows. Toy ben tu, Mama, he said, smiling. Toy ben tu, Neely, she answered, more than anything in this world. For a while, folks in Orchard City talked about Neely and Letty's disappearance from the mountain. Finally, they decided that even though they left all their belongings, there was no sign of foul play. Perhaps Letty and the boy had relocated somewhere else. The explanation satisfied everybody except Letty's old friends and Sheriff Martin. Every now and then, Germaine and Sylvia would come up to Orchard Mountain. They'd go to Letty's place and look around, hoping to find something that might explain her disappearance. Sheriff Martin helped despite the fact that his inventory of clues was scanty. In the clearing, he found a twisted shotgun and a series of footprints that led nowhere. In the house, he'd found a letter from the university stating that the words Letty wanted to look up, Sawa, Fros, Naga, Porta, weren't part of any known language. Standing alone on the ledge where Neely's teddy bear had turned up, they discussed a scrap of paper. The clue they felt was the key to solving the case. Why then, they wondered, had Letty written Boo Mama and underscored it several times? I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, it came from a book by Patricia McKissick called The Dark 30 Southern Tales of the Supernatural. And there are several stories just like this. I hope you enjoyed it.